So we've covered already a motive for Romeo for doing what he's doing, the seeking out of female companionship in order to solve the issue that he is dealing with, which is the issue of man's cruelty to man, the horror of the world, as though he's dealing with the problem of human pain and thinks that a young lady will be the solution. But what motive does Juliet have for doing what she does? Especially, not to let the cat out of the bag, but the fact that she begins a romance with Romeo, whom she knows from the very start is her family's mortal enemy. It can't end well. Well, there's one interpretation, of course, that we can use, which is that her motivation is pure love, that she falls madly in love with Romeo over the course of 2 pages, and that she is driven by this force of Eros, this force of the goddess Aphrodite. She's driven by this force she can't explain to defy her family. I mean, she even says at one point to him, she says, forswear thy family, or deny thy father, and forswear thy name. So maybe she's doing that. Maybe she is driven by love, and Shakespeare's play is about the beauty of love and how it drives us to do things which are unconventional, which are risky, which are sometimes lethal. I think there's another interpretation, though, which I'm going to offer here, which may be a little bit more acidic, but I think that's more in keeping with Shakespeare. He was, again, a realist. And I think because of his realism, he often comes across as a cynic. To look for motive, we have to look at various references to the character. Not just what the character says, though that's important, but what other people say about the character. So first we want to turn to Act 1, Scene 2. This is an exchange between Lord Capulet and Paris. Now keep in mind that Paris, the Count Paris, is a very fine young man. He's wealthy, he's well off, he's very well educated, and he's a noble guy. He doesn't seem to have any vice to him. So he'd be a very fine catch for Juliet. He's roughly around his mid to late 20s, I would suspect. And Capulet has put forth to him that he wants Juliet to be married in 2 years. In other words, Capulet says, she's only 14, and I want you, Paris, to wait for 2 years until she's 16. He says this, my child is yet a stranger in the world. She hath not seen the change of 14 years. Let 2 more summers wither in their pride ere we think her ripe to be a bride. To which Paris responds, younger than she our happy mother's made, and too soon marred are those so early made. The earth hath swallowed all my hopes but she is the hopeful lady of my earth. But woo her, gentle Paris, get her heart. My will to her consent is but a part, and she agree, within her scope of choice lies my consent, and fair according voice. Now notice in saying that, he is caring for his daughter. This is an age when fathers frequently arrange marriages for their daughters. And they sometimes arrange marriages with much, much older men. Sometimes with men that were incompatible with their daughters, or men that were cruel because they wanted the money mostly. It was a financial contraction between a father and the man that he was marrying his daughter to, almost like he was selling goods. But in this case, Capulet, Shakespeare makes clear, doesn't do that to Juliet. Juliet, if we remember the family tree, notice Juliet is his only daughter. Notice that he has been married to Lady Capulet and no one else, unlike Montague, whose wife died in childbirth. This is probably with Romeo. Romeo is the last child, and Montague has remarried to another woman. But Capulet has been married to the same woman, has had only one child. And he seems to care enough about his child that he wants her to last at least 2 more summers before she gets married. Why? On the one hand, because she's still a child, and he wants her to enjoy her childhood. But also bear in mind that childbirth at the time was a very dangerous business. And if Juliet is only 14 and she gets with child, she will hardly be even 15 by the time she's first giving birth. That can be very risky, threatening her life and the life of the child as well. If she survives childbirth, she will be changed. She'll be a different person, no longer a child at all. So he says, let her be a child for 2 more years. He also suggests to Paris that he wants Juliet to agree to the marriage. Again, a very rare thing at the time, because most marriages that were arranged by fathers had nothing to do with the will of the daughter. Here, Capulet is suggesting that Juliet's choice of Paris is important, and he encourages Paris to woo Juliet and get her love. What does that tell us? Well, it tells us that Lord Capulet loves Juliet very much, and he really wants her consent. He wants what's best for her. This is, again, rare, but it suggests that there's a very strong relationship between the father and the daughter, that he really does care for her very much. This, however, seems to be in contrast to her relationship with Lady Capulet, her mother. There are a number of different things to note in the scene with Juliet and the nurse and Lady Capulet. This is Act 1, Scene 3. The first thing to notice in this is that Lady Capulet doesn't seem to have a very close association with Juliet at all. She doesn't know what to do with her when she's in the room. She says, everybody leave, I want to talk to my daughter alone. She says, nurse, give leave a while, we must talk in secret. And then there's a caesura, the pause in the line. And she says, nurse, come back again. I remembered me. Thou hear our counsel. In other words, she has a tough time being alone with Juliet. She doesn't know what to do with her. It's as though she's awkward around her. Well, we find out Juliet is 14, and the nurse knows that more than Lady Capulet. Lady Capulet says she's not 14. And the nurse says, oh, no, she is. I know it because I've counted the number of Lammastides, the celebrations once per year like Christmas. I've counted the number of times that have gone by since she was first born. More to that is that the nurse has this very long speech where she suggests a number of things about her relationship with Juliet. First, she says, even out of all the days in the year, come Lammas Eve at night, she'll be 14. Susan and she, God rest all good Christian souls, were of an age, well, Susan is with God, she was too good for me. But as I said, on Lammas Eve at night she shall be 14. That shall she marry. I remember it well, just since the earthquake now 11 years, and she was weaned. I never shall forget it. Of all the days of the year, upon that day, if I had then laid wormwood to my dove, sitting in the sun under the dove-house wall, my lord and you within a mantua. Nay, I do bear a grain. But as I said, when it did taste the wormwood on the nipple of my dug, and felt it bitter, pretty fool, to see it tetchy, and fall out with the dug. Shake, quoth the dove-house, 'twas no need, I trow, to bid me trudge. So you notice in there that the nurse had a daughter named Susan, and Susan died, probably in infancy. And the nurse was given the task of nursing Juliet, that is, taking Juliet to suckle and gain nourishment as a mother would. Lady Capulet did not nurse Juliet. The nurse nursed Juliet. And consequently, there's a bond between the nurse and Juliet that Lady Capulet has no access to. More to the point is that the nurse, when she goes to remember when Juliet was weaned, that is, when she was moved from milk to solid food, she remembers that Lady Capulet was at the time in Mantua. She was away. So you've got a mother who is not attached to the daughter, even from infancy, even from the time she's born, who is away frequently, a jet-setting mother. And later then, in that same speech, the nurse even suggests that she was there when Juliet began to walk, because she says the following.
Since that time it is 11 years, for then she could stand high, low, nay, by the rude. She could have run and waddled all about, for even the day before she broke her brow, and then my husband, God be with his soul, he was a merry man. He took up the child. Yea, quoth he, dost thou fall upon thy face? Thou wilt fall backward when thou hast more wit, wilt thou not, Jewel? And by my holidays, the pretty wretch left crying and said, "Ay, to see now how a jest shall come about. I warrant, and I should live 1,000 years, I never should forget it. Wilt thou not, Jewel?" quoth he, and pretty fool extended and said, "Ay."
So it was a nurse who was there when Juliet was first suckled, and it was a nurse who was there when Juliet was first weaned, and it was a nurse who was there when Juliet took her first steps and bonked her head. Not Lady Capulet. Lady Capulet, who's extremely wealthy, farmed her daughter out to another woman and has been taking numerous vacations since then, leaving Juliet alone with the nurse. And you see that there's a certain coldness in Lady Capulet, who keeps telling the nurse to be quiet, stop laughing, stop telling that joke. I want to be serious. She's a very businesslike woman. I would say that this is sort of the jet set, the go-getter, the high-octane type A personality, if you will, who loves living among the rich and the wealthy, but doesn't take great interest in her daughter, except to marry her off. And she says later on in Act 1, Scene 3, she says,
"Well, think of marriage now. Younger than you here in Verona, ladies of esteem, are made already mothers. By my count, I was your mother much upon these years that you are now made. Thus then, in brief, the valiant Paris seeks you for his love."
So notice there that she's trying to get Juliet to think of marriage herself, but in doing so, she suggests that she was only 13 or 14 when she had Juliet. Which means if Juliet is 14, Lady Capulet is probably about 27 or 28. Young, fit, her whole life ahead of her, and she's neglected her daughter most of her life. This idea that I was your mother much upon these years that you are now a maid suggests that she herself was deprived of a childhood. She became a mother far too early. And she wanted to continue sort of the play and the fun and the life of luxury and not be bothered with a child. Children are difficult. They weigh you down. And to have to worry about a child all the time is not what Lady Capulet wants to do. She wants to send Juliet off to the nurse, off to daycare, off to be taken care of by somebody else. So Lady Capulet can go to the parties. Lady Capulet can go to the art shows, the museums, the jet-setting life of wealth. And then there's a further thing that Shakespeare simply hints at, which I find rather intriguing. She suggests to Juliet that Juliet take great interest in Paris because Paris is the intended of Juliet. Guess what she says?
"What say you? Can you love the gentleman? This night you shall behold him at our feast. Read o'er the volume of young Paris' face, and find a light writ there with beauty's pen. Examine every married lineament, and see how one another lends content. And what obscured in this fair volume lies, find written in the margin of his eye. This precious book of love, this unbound lover, to beautify him only lacks a cover. The fish lives in the sea, and is much pride for fair without the fair within the eye. That book in many's eyes doth share the glory, that in gold clasps locks in the golden story. So shall you share all that he doth possess, by having him making yourself no less."
Notice, however, how much she extols the virtues of Paris's beauty. He's a fine man, a fine figure. His face is fine. He's got lovely eyes. He's an unbound lover. He's a man who's truly gorgeous to see, truly lovely. And if, for instance, Paris is 27 or 28, how old is Lady Capulet? She's about 27 or 28. That's odd. Now, we could say that Paris is younger. We could say Paris is 18 or 19. That's possible. In which case, there may not be a hint of anything. But if he is a well-established man, as is suggested, he's a wealthy man, and he has inherited his property from his own father, it's more likely that he is of an older age, that he's not just a young man out courting, because that didn't happen. If he were, say, 19 or 18, his own father would be courting for him, contracting marriage with Lord Capulet. As it is, Paris is contracting the marriage with Lord Capulet, which seems to suggest that Paris is slightly older. But he's not ancient. He's older. Puts him about probably late 20s. If Paris is in his late 20s and wealthy and good-looking, and Lady Capulet is in her late 20s and is good-looking and wealthy, there is a hint that maybe Lady Capulet actually is arranging this marriage for Juliet in a not so disinterested way. She's a cold woman, a conniving woman, and doesn't have nearly the zest and the zeal of a nurse. Well, that puts us at an interesting impasse, so to speak. Here's Juliet, raised by her nurse, abandoned by her mom, left to fend for herself by her natural mom for most all of her life. Now her mom is setting up a marriage, which perhaps Juliet recognizes is not completely disinterested. And she might be a little ticked off. It's not the first time, for instance, that daughters have seen their mothers as being rivals. It's not the first time that daughters have seen their mothers as really annoying and really obnoxious because of what the mother indulges in. And it would not be the first time that a daughter did something reckless or rash to stab at her mother. If we're looking for motive with Juliet, sure, we could say she falls in love with Romeo. True. I'm sure we could say it's delightful that she does, and she's propelled by the goddess Aphrodite, almost against her will, to fall in love with the enemy of her family. But Shakespeare, being the complex writer that he is, suggests that there's a great deal of evidence to the fact that maybe Juliet's love is actually a plan to escape her mother, a plan to stab back at her mother for all the years of neglect. Possibly a conniving plan whereby she could get her own family, her own way, her own man of her choosing, and at the same time put a knife in her mother's heart.